welcome to the Astranti pre-scene analysis video series for the February 2019 strategic case study exam on wearable fitness technology producer Vita. So before we begin the analysis, I'll just tell you a bit about who I am and also how we are going to go through this video series. So first of all, my name is Peter Steth. I am the head of strategic case study here at Astranti. I've been teaching the strategic case study since 2016, and prior to that, I taught the management and operational case study. I'm also heavily involved in writing the various mock exams that we produce for our course, and also marking those mocks as well, seeing where students are going right, seeing where they are going wrong, and I use that information to help feedback into my video analysis as well, common mistakes that students make. I've also written several of the free study texts that you can use here at Astranti. So on to the video series itself. Essentially, we're going to go through the pre-scene section by section, picking out the various key points, various things that are going to be important for your exam. Also look at how real world companies, or how companies in this actual industry, obviously it's a fictional company in a fictional industry, fictional country, etc. But there are plenty of parallels with the real world, and that's what we will be tying the analysis to. So look at various key business models as well, some of the things that you will have learnt during your objective test studies, how we can apply some of those models to the case. So SWOT analysis, stakeholder matrices, and so on. We'll also look at likely exam issues that could arise, as in when we're looking through the analysis, are there particular points that they keep referring to? Is that a hint on where the examiner is thinking they may take the exam? What previous questions have come up in previous exams when this kind of information has been given, and so on. And also just key exam hints and tips as well, things to prepare you for the day, ways in which you can perhaps streamline your information, streamline the information within the pre-scene so that it helps you for the exam. Then look at the strategic analysis, our strategic analysis video, which looks at all the different models, lots of the big models, and applies them directly to the pre-scene. So we'll be looking at where the company is, where the company wants to be, and how it's going to get there using various different theories. And we'll conclude the video series by looking at the top 10 most likely issues. These will be based on previous issues that have come up in previous case studies. It will also be based on how much weight is given to particular topics, to particular things within the pre-scene. And how this actual series will work is when we're going through it section by section, I'm going to assume that we have no prior knowledge as we go through it, as in the whole point of this video series should be as if you and I were looking through the videos together, or looking through the pre-scene together. So I'm not going to act as if I've read through the entire pre-scene when I'm going through each individual page. We're going to look at it as if we're seeing everything for the first time. So we're not going to be ruling anything out at any particular stage because of what may come later in the pre-scene or what may come later in information given to us by CIMA. We're just going to assume that every single thing is relevant. We're going to assume that every single sentence is the first time that you or I have seen it, and we're analyzing it based on its own individual, mutually exclusive merits. What I suggest is that you read through a particular section and make notes, and then come back to the start of the video and we'll go through it together. And as already mentioned, at the end of the pre-scene analysis, we will then move on to the strategic analysis and top 10 most likely issues, which in a sense summarize everything that we will have done throughout the pre-scene. And as you're making notes on the pre-scene, remember this is the context for which the exam will be based. So there will be a lot of information here that perhaps won't necessarily be relevant in terms of answering the question. They're not going to be testing us on our knowledge of the pre-scene. They're not going to be testing us on things specifically in the pre-scene. It is the background information that will give us context when we are answering our questions in the exam. So if they are asking us a question on whether they should go ahead with this particular project and give us some information on that project, we will have background information on the industry, background information on the company that will allow us to pinpoint the suitability of this project based on what we know about the organization. Remember that you shouldn't be pre-writing anything based on the pre-scene. So don't assume that they're going to ask us a question on this. I'm going to write out a mock answer based entirely on this information in the pre-scene, and I'm going to ignore anything that comes up in the unseen, because remember, the unseen is the actual exam. The material given to us in the unseen should take precedence over material in the pre-scene if it contradicts. So don't write anything based on the pre-scene or pre-write anything based on the pre-scene, because it is the background information for us to deal with it. It's not the unseen, it's not the exam, it's just the background information. But saying that, we must use the information in the exam, but we must tie it back to the context of the unseen. And your recommendations must be consistent with strategic analysis. So if when we're going through our strategic analysis and we're looking at suitable projects, we're looking at suitable things for the company to undertake, if your recommendation completely flies in the face of all that analysis, it flies in the face of everything that's in the pre-scene, everything's in the unseen, then you're likely to get marked down because it is not a sensible conclusion. So we're going to start on this introductory page, and it's actually a lot of information for us to look at on this page. A lot of students, they'll get the pre-scene and they'll skip straight ahead to the risk statement, to the statement about the board of directors, to the financial statements. They skip to the things that they think are going to be more, in a sense, tangible to look at. But there's actually a lot of information on this first page. Just as the pre-scene is the context for the exam, this short introduction to the pre-scene is the context for the pre-scene itself. And there's a lot of information here about how we should be approaching the rest of the pre-scene, giving us information so that we can approach the pre-scene in an appropriate way. And the first thing that the pre-scene mentions here is that we are a senior manager at Vita, a consumer electronics company. So we're given the scene setting sentence here that we are the senior manager, or we are a senior manager at Vita, a consumer electronics company. That is the context in which we should be approaching everything else in this pre-scene. And CIMA themselves have mentioned that this is a practical exam. We are playing a role. It is not a theoretical exam. We are not writing essays. We are answering specific problems occurring at Vita from the perspective of a senior manager working at Vita. And CIMA themselves have said that as a senior manager, you are expected to analyze strategic options. So you are putting your E3 into practice there. You are also supposed to analyze the stakeholders, how it's going to impact stakeholders, look at the risk factors for everything involved, be that the project you are undertaking or risks affecting the organization itself, and also how you are going to appropriately and prudently get the finance and the funding for different products and different projects. You're not going crazy suggesting that we take out hundreds of millions of N dollars in loans. So it's a summary of what you are expected to provide in the exam. Sound advice relating to projects, relating to the organization, relating to the organization's strategy, taking into account risk and funding factors. And it's worth noting that CIMA themselves has produced a document detailing what is expected of you in this strategic case study exam, and the examiner's report does regularly mention that students are not playing the role properly. So I advise you to ensure you're keeping that in mind whenever you do research into the industry, whenever you look at the pre-scene, whenever you are taking mock exams, and when you are taking the exam itself. Keep all those things in mind. That is what you are supposed to be providing the board of directors when you are answering your questions. And the introduction itself goes on to mention this, that we report directly to the Chief Financial Officer and advise them on special projects and strategic matters. So we are reporting directly to a Chief Financial Officer, not just another manager, not just a department head, but the Chief Financial Officer of the organization. And what will the Chief Financial Officer of Vita want? They'll want decent information, suggestions. They'll want to know that they have all the information they need to make the correct calls for the organization, or to take the correct information, the appropriate information back to the rest of the board. They don't want to be given huge amounts of data by us and then just told, well, you're the Chief Financial Officer, make something of that. How often have you heard the phrase that this person comes to me with problems, this person comes to me with solutions? You want to be the person in the case study exam that comes to the Chief Financial Officer with the solutions, not the problems. So we have to ensure that when we provide information to the board of directors, that we are appropriately summarizing it and giving suggestions. We are coming up with recommendations, justified recommendations, and providing them with the next steps to take the project forward. So always conclude your answers by giving a firm conclusion and some action points to take the project forward. And we also know that the company is a consumer electronics company. So it's selling to the consumer, or the end user of its products is the consumer. Whether that is sold directly to the consumer or through retailers, through wholesalers at this point, we are not sure. But the end user is the consumer, which means that they are a stakeholder of our organization. And that's another thing that we need to be building up as we go through this pre-scene, is the various different stakeholders. Because as a senior manager, you are expected to answer questions by taking the attitudes and into account all the various different stakeholders. So when we are building up our Mendelow's matrix of our different stakeholders, we need to put consumers and end users into that matrix. And given that they will not have much power, but they will perhaps be very interested in what we're doing, very interested in developments of our softwares and of our products, we need to put them in the high interest, low power category. So that's the first of our stakeholders, first of many that we will add into that matrix as we go through the pre-scene. And it also throws into question the business model of the company already. We know that we sell to the consumer, the end user is the consumer. But who else may use electronics? Who else may use fitness technology, activity tracker technology, which is the product that we produce here at Vita? Perhaps these sorts of systems could be used in hospitals. Perhaps they could be used in gyms. Perhaps they could be used by various different organizations where fitness and activity is very important. So perhaps there is scope for direct to business to business selling. And the good thing about business to business selling is that once you have secured a contract, that is a high ticket sales value. That is something that can be renewed time and time again, rather than just selling to a consumer who may pay $100 or whatever the price may be for the product. If we get a contract that is paid on an annual basis to provide products to these organizations, to health centers, to gyms, to hospitals, whatever it may be, that is a potential market development strategy to bring us into a new market. We also know that Vita themselves designs and sells these wireless enabled wearable fitness and activity trackers. So designs and it sells. But there's no mention about the production, the actual manufacturing process. Now, that's not to say that they don't take care of it themselves, but what the precinct has told us here and now is that Vita, where we work, designs and sells them. So innovative, decent, high quality designs is one of the critical success factors. And we were talking about what is important to the organization. Designing wireless-enabled wearable fitness and activity trackers is one of the critical success factors. Being innovative and producing a good product. And so what may occur is that whilst the design is handled by Vita, once everything, all the blueprints, all the designs have been drawn up, the actual manufacturing process is outsourced to a hardware manufacturer who specializes in that. And that's not to say that that's a bad thing, because if what is critical to us at Vita is the software, is the actual design of the product, then that is what we should be putting our energy, putting our focus into. If we are not a dedicated hardware manufacturer, a company that can actually put the various different components together, but there are plenty of organizations that can do that, then it could be a prudent move to outsource the actual production, the actual manufacturing process to a specialized manufacturer, provided the level of quality is maintained. And this outsourced manufacturer would, in a sense, become a key supplier of the organization, because we rely on them to provide our actual end product. So again, thinking about stakeholders, they become another key stakeholder of our organization. We may have contracts with them. We also have to think about our Porter's Five Forces. How big a company is this outsourced manufacturer? Do we rely on them, or do they rely on us? Because that will of course affect the supplier power, which will in turn affect the contracts that we can have with this organization, and that will in turn affect our profitability. And our company, Vita, is headquartered in the country of Newland. And this is a prosperous country, so therefore it's likely to be in a position where individuals, consumers within the nation do have a reasonable proportion of disposable income to spend on things like this. And also a significant proportion of the population take an active interest in sport and a wide range of health and fitness activities. So there's a few external factors at play here that are important for our organization to be a success. We need to have a reasonable amount of disposable income so that people have the money to purchase these products, and also there needs to be the technology there to be able to provide what they are looking for, and also the social climate within the country needs to be one that has an active interest in sport. Otherwise, people aren't going to be interested in purchasing this product. If no one cares about health, no one cares about fitness, why would people spend money on trackers for their health and fitness? So there's quite a few external factors that make this product needed or not needed. And that also comes into play when we're looking at perhaps expanding into other countries. If there is no demand in that country for health and fitness trackers, then our product is not going to be successful, regardless of how good it is, because there is simply no demand for it. And the final sentence on this introductory page talks about the currency being the N dollar. So when you see a currency, you need to be thinking again about economic factors. So we've already spoken about economics with regards to the consumer, with regards to the income level, but from a more national perspective, we need to think about the levels of debt we have at the organization, because interest rates could affect the amount of debt that we take on, which could affect our plans for expanding if we need to take on additional investment. We also need to think about overseas trade. What is the N dollar like in terms of its value related to the dollar, the pound, the euro, whatever it may be, whatever fictional currencies in other fictional countries given in the unseen exam, because that can affect trade. We need to think about the risk that we will lose out due to exchange rate fluctuations and ways in which we could combat that. It could be taking out forwards contracts, futures contracts, options, could be leading or lagging our payments with our buyers and our suppliers in overseas countries. This is where we bring forward or push back the date in which the transaction goes through so that we take advantage of exchange rates. Or we could just always invoice in one particular currency. Therefore, we at our organization would never gain, but we would never lose out. Now, some of you may be listening to me speaking about hedging and speaking about those various different F3 and P3 risk management, currency risk management factors, and start to worry. You may think, oh, I hated all that sort of stuff. I don't want to learn all that again. Rest assured, for the strategic case study exam, it is a practical exam. You are not being tested on your theoretical knowledge of hedging. You will not be asked to conduct any calculations like you may have done in your objective tests, because you were tested on that in your P3 and in your F3. This is far more holistic. This is about the act of using hedging methods from a strategic perspective to minimize the risk that your organization will lose out through currency fluctuations. That's how you need to approach hedging in the strategic case study exam. So in short, when we look at all this information here, which, didn't I tell you that we'd actually find quite a lot on this opening page that we can use going forward? What we can read from this is that we are not just looking at this from a theoretical perspective. We're not just looking at what Ansos matrix is, what Mendelow's matrix is, what hedging is. We are putting it all together as part of expressing and demonstrating our business acumen. That's what the strategic case study is all about, your business acumen. How will do all these things work together? How will they affect the organization? How will they affect Vita and the way in which it operates? And as I said, we've already got quite a few things, quite a few models on the go that we can add to as we go through the case. We've already got several pestle factors here. We've got how having access to technology is important, the income level of the public, given that we sell directly to the consumer, we sell to the consumer, they're the end user of our products, the social environment. If there is no positive attitude towards health and fitness care, there's not going to be a demand for our product. We've also got various different stakeholders. We've got suppliers, we've got the end users, we've also got the employees of our own organization, of course. We've also got critical success factors starting to appear in terms of design, innovation, and perhaps outsourcing our production to make use of experts. And there's also various different threats to the organization. What if there is increased demand in other countries and we are not able to take advantage of it because of the low power of the end dollar compared with that country's currency? That's going to be a risk that we need to hedge against. We're also looking at potential opportunities already, opportunities to sell directly to businesses, to various different organizations that can implement the use of wearable fitness and activity tracker devices. And we also need to think about the threats of other products. This is a very new, very competitive industry where there are a lot of substitutes. Now, those of you who have worn wearable fitness and activity trackers, some of you may be wearing them right now, and there's a good chance that that fitness and activity tracker that you are wearing is a Fitbit. And this company, Vita, is very much based off of Fitbit, and there's a lot of information in various different accounts that have been produced by Fitbit themselves that are quite in corollary with the Vita pre-scene. And one of the biggest threats to Fitbit is the growth of Apple Watches and the growth of other smartwatches, because these watches do the same job, but they also do what a phone does. So why would you spend X amount of money on a Fitbit that tracks your fitness levels, that tracks your heartbeat, etc., when you could get a smartwatch that does that, but also allows you to text, also allows you to make phone calls, also allows you to play music, particularly when a lot of these watches are being given away as part of the phone contracts. So that's one of the big threats to the wearable fitness technology, is the growth of smartphone producers who are entering this market with their smart watches. So now that we have our background information on the preset, on the role that we are playing, let's move on to the first full page of information on the preset, which is an overview of the wearable technology market. The preset defines wearable technology as any kind of electronic that can be worn on the body, so either as accessory or part of clothing. And the types that it mentions are things that you might expect, like wrist-based fitness and activity trackers and smartwatches, but there's a few other ones here, such as smart shoes, clothing, and virtual reality headsets. Now, virtual reality is generally considered to be one of the next big things in technology. It's still very much in an entry phase. It's still very much in its infancy, but there is real scope in this particular field for virtual reality. And actually, a couple of pre-scenes ago, there was a gym organization. And when doing my research for that gym organization, one of the things that did come up was virtual gyms, and how you can put on your virtual headset and it's like you're in a gym and you are being instructed by a coach, and you have all these kind of bits of information about how well you're doing, judging your technique, your form, etc., in whatever exercise you may be doing. And so this actually ties quite nicely with the kinds of things that Vita is doing, because Vita is all about fitness, it's all about activity tracking, it's about helping people with their health and fitness. So maybe in the future, here's a real opportunity for Vita to get into the virtual gym market. And that's a really good way in which the company could grow. It could branch into a new and exciting form of technology and really diversify its product range. And one of the reasons why this sort of technology has grown so well is the fact that it's all connected to the internet. So you can share data, you can analyze data across mobile networks, as the pre-scene has stated. And one of the big organizations to do this, or the big apps at the moment, is Strava, which looks at cycling and running particularly, specifically. And it tracks your movement, it tracks the route that you've taken. I'm sure many of you have seen friends or family members posting shots from their Strava app onto Facebook, onto Instagram, etc., to share what they have done, and that's part of the social aspect of it. And this has a knock-on effect in that if people are sharing information, they're almost competing with each other, then more and more people sign up, more and more people try to register good performance on these apps. So there are perhaps areas that could be explored by Vita here, because we know that the organization specializes in the wearable fitness and activity tracker market, but there are various other forms here mentioned in the overview that they do not currently partake in. So there's no mention of virtual reality headsets, no mention of smartwatches, smart shoes, etc. So again, potential areas that the organization could enter, particularly given that we already have that expertise within the fitness and activity tracker market, which is the focus of the next section on this page. As you can see from the images here, we have pictures of wearable wrist technology designed to track your activity. So it looks at various different things, such as the number of steps taken, the distance, the calories that you have used, how well you're sleeping, and your heart rate, etc., which is all mentioned in this section here. And this is the kinds of things that Vita products look at. Vita products analyze and provide statistics for. And whilst this is being used in various different professions, such as medical professions, security services, military forces, as mentioned here, the actual private consumer market is very recent. And this also ties back to what I was saying on the previous page, where I was saying perhaps there is scope for market development by selling directly to these kinds of organizations, to these kinds of businesses, getting high-ticket sale contracts with them to renew on an annual basis, to provide in far larger quantities than just selling directly to the consumer. And this growth in the private market has generally been facilitated by the rise and the improvement in technology. So it says here the last 10 years, phenomenal rise in technical accuracy, usability, affordability, and the profitability of these devices. Now, I remember about 10, 15 years ago, all you could get was a simple pedometer, or sometimes you even had to click every step that you took. And now you can get these sorts of things simply on your phone, on a band that you wear on your wrist, and it's incredibly accurate, as well as the pre-seen states. So again, it's the technology that is the key facilitator of this market. So again, when we're thinking about the external environment, things that can have an external impact on our business, technology is one of the key factors. And what this means for Vita, and what it could mean if we were to be given such a question in the exam, would be to look at advancements in technology. I expect there to be questions in some of the variants relating to adopting new technologies, to purchasing perhaps new softwares that can be used to improve our systems, by branching out into or not by branching out, but by purchasing new design softwares that allow us to create and to produce our products more effectively. Perhaps there are plenty of things that we could be doing with our products, with our various different activity trackers, our fitness trackers, that we are not aware of. Perhaps there are even more advanced heartbeat monitors out there. Perhaps there are even more advanced step counters out there that we need to be integrating into our product. And given that design and performance are key critical success factors for our organization, for Vita, that is incredibly important. And a majority of these sorts of health and fitness trackers, for example, the example I've used is Fitbit, and Fitbit also has a smartphone app that works with Apple devices, it also works with Google devices, Android devices, is that the apps sync with the devices and then produce an interface that allows you to analyze it, and it all goes over the wireless technology. And that's all well and good, but one of the threats that we face at Vita because of this is the use of apps. Now, using apps is great. We may use a lot of these apps. These apps may work wonders with our products. But the problem we have here is who owns the app sites. The app sites are owned by companies like Google and owned by companies like Apple, and for use on their products. And so when we speak about the threat of companies that produce smartwatches like Apple, like Google, of taking our market share, we are relying on their systems for our products. So they are, in a sense, key suppliers of our organization. They provide us with a marketplace to sell our app, or to at least give away our app to be used with the product. So they actually hold the market, or the market facilitator, that is the app stores. So if they decide to really push their own products on these sorts of sites, if they start to push their own smartwatches, etc., then that could cause problems because we rely on them, but they are going to want to be promoting their own products first. So that's a threat to the organization, but it's also an indicator that the companies that produce the apps, the companies that produce the areas in which apps can be sold, such as Apple, such as Google, are also key stakeholders of our organization. Because if we couldn't sell our apps on the App Store to use with our devices, then that could cause all sorts of problems. This section again finishes by talking about community. The idea of challenging people, challenging themselves, competing against friends, other users who use the same advice. And this is part of the appeal of it. So going back to what I was saying about the social aspect of it, the sharing and the competing, and also using the example of Strava as a key app that does this sort of thing. And so what this means for Vita is that social media and having an identity and having a presence on social media as well is also very important, as it's all about forming this community that the pre-scene is talking about here. So another key component of the business is to have well-maintained social aspects to it. We shouldn't deviate from that in any way, shape or form. In fact, should look at perhaps doing more to improve our presence on social media. Not saying that they don't have a good presence on social media, because of course at the moment we're just going through the pre-scene page by page, building up a story, building up a picture of Vita, of the organization. And so if they do not actively promote themselves as much on social media as they should do, then that is a really good thing that they should be doing. That would be more of a way in which they could expand their existing market. And a way in which they could analyze that would be to perhaps look at the number of followers on apps like Instagram, on Facebook, etc. How many people are actively talking about Vita, talking about health and fitness measured through Vita technology on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. And it's a big marketplace, as we can see, as it's estimated there are over 150 million active users of fitness and activity trackers throughout the world. And this is defined as a user who, within 3 months prior to the date of the measurement, has been synced to a health and fitness tracker, has logged at least 100 steps with a health and fitness tracker. So again, a key performance indicator for Vita with regards to its position within the community would be how many millions of users it has, because then that will give an impression of how big Vita is compared to the greater market. Well, I would say that perhaps it's quite a loose way of tracking. Logged at least 100 steps with a health and fitness tracker. Now, 100 steps, 100 is a big number and it may sound like a lot, but 100 steps really isn't much at all. You may take 100 steps simply leaving your house to go to the car. So that's not actually perhaps an indicator of how many people are actively using it in the way that has been spoken about on the previous page, where people are logging how much they have run, how many steps they have climbed, how far they have cycled, the routes that they have cycled, etc., as per things like Strava. I wouldn't go on Facebook and boast about how I walked 100 steps today, because that's literally, as I said, from my house to my car, or from the car park to the office in which I work. It's not illustrating that I've actively partaken in a health and fitness regime. And so there's some key drivers to the fitness and activity tracker market. These are the kind of things that Vita need to be aware of, because these are going to have a big impact on the scope of consumers, or the number of consumers that are going to be able to purchase Vita products. And again, this will add to that growing pest analysis, that growing external environment that we have been building up throughout the course of this video, and will continue to do over the course of this pre-scene series. So the first big indicator has been the induction of smartphones and smartphone-based tracking apps that can be purchased quite easily, quite cheaply. The actual smartphones themselves are far more prevalent than they were 10-15 years ago, where they were the premium phones, so they're very expensive, and generally all phones these days are pretty much smartphones. And so because of the low cost, because of the accessibility, lots of people are starting to use them. And a lot of apps are supported by major operating systems such as Apple and Android. And again, it goes back to the point that I was making before about this being good from the perspective of we've got a lot of people who use Android and Apple phones, and therefore a lot of people can use our apps. But then as Apple and Google are starting to gain a footing in the fitness and activity tracker market themselves, the fact that they also own the app stores could be problematic in the future, as it gives them more of a stranglehold on the industry because they are vertically integrated already, because they own the app store, they own the phones, they own the operating systems, they own the smartwatches, whereas we have to design our products to meet all their different requirements, all their different demands. And it's also further evidence that the growth in technology, the growth in software is very important for the expansion of this market. Just as in the third reason here, where it talks about activity trackers being far more accurate and sophisticated and being more lightweight, being more user-friendly, and generally seen as a fashion accessory. Again, so we're building in the social aspect of it as well. People want to wear these things. They're not big, ugly, clunky things. They can be quite fashionable. There's scope for various different watch brands to enter the smartwatch market. Again, using an example of another previous pre-scene, there was a pre-scene of a watch company called Steelcast, which was very much like Rolex, and it spoke about the growth of the smartwatch market. And whilst a lot of smartwatches were being produced by the tech companies, there was a growing demand for the technology, but having that luxury brand as well. So the chances of companies like Rolex, Steelcast, etc. using this technology in their watches, working with them perhaps to create a crossover brand, so a joint venture, if you're looking at your various different methods of growth, to create a new product, to create a smartwatch that was also very smart, very sophisticated, very much high quality. And an example of that is Michael Kors. Michael Kors is a big high-end fashion brand, and they have been producing smartwatches recently. Well, the one thing we do need to be aware of is when we are creating our products, when we are purchasing hardware from various different organizations to design our products, we need to be aware of this fitness tracker being accurate, being sophisticated. Now, the growth or the advancement of accuracy and sophistication has improved, but how good is it? Remember that people might be using these for real fitness means. Not just they want to be healthier, but perhaps it's very important they monitor their heartbeat because they have been told that they have a heart condition, etc. If we're not accurate, we could be feeding that person false information that could have a real detrimental impact on their health. So that is a big risk. If we do not have good quality materials, good quality components in our products, we could be feeding false information that could have an actual detrimental impact on a user, which in turn would have a big detrimental impact on the reputation of the organization, could result in legal action and as well as reputational damage. And don't worry, I haven't forgotten the second reason, the second contributing factor. It's only just because the first and third were more linked. But the second one is to do with health and fitness programs, more health and fitness awareness. It's far more commonplace these days to see programs about health and fitness on television, to see literature about it given to you by your GP, given to you by your doctor, and it's all part of the different governments in Europe and North America trying to promote fitness, trying to reduce the cost on their healthcare systems, what is known as the obesity crisis in some countries, given that obesity rates within the populace has reached quite high levels, at 20 to 30% plus of the adult population. And so again, this is a political factor. This is governments actively getting involved in promoting health and fitness. So again, going back to that pestle factor, the one that we haven't looked at yet is the P for politics. The governments in the countries that we operate promoting health and fitness will in turn be very beneficial for our company. And the final section of this page looks at the latest development in the fitness and activity tracker market, which was the growth of smartwatches. And this is something that we've been speaking about already in this video several times, the prominence of smartwatches perhaps how detrimental the growth of smartwatches will be to the fitness and activity tracker market. Again, the example I used was, why would you want to have something that just did monitoring your health and fitness when you could also have something that monitors your health and fitness, and you can make phone calls on, and you can look at the internet, and you can check your social media rather than having to upload it from your tracker onto your smartphone or onto a computer and then track it on the smartphone or the computer. It does more of the jobs for you. And again, it's detrimental to the company because the companies that produce the smartwatches also produce the app stores, also produce the smartphones, and that is the problem. But there's also opportunity here. A lot of this other information about what smartwatches do is not something that Vita do, but Vita are experts in the health and fitness activity tracker market. So where there is a crisis, there's also an opportunity. Perhaps there is the opportunity to work with one of these producers to provide the components, to provide the software for their trackers, for their activity trackers. So whilst they're taking care of the internet, the social media, the phone calls, the text messages, all the things that they're good at, we then provide them with the things that we are good at. We create a crossover brand and we work together with them. Alternatively, we could also try to create our own smartwatch by working with a company that produces softwares for internet, for social media, for all the other different apps. So there is also a big opportunity here. And as you can see, the pre-scene itself looks at one of the biggest opportunities being to create hybrid watches that look at the watch as a fashion accessory, but also as part of the fitness and tracker market. So that's a big opportunity, where be that working with another company, could be working with a smartwatch producer, it could be working with a high-end watch producer to create a crossover smartwatch. It could be creating our own smartwatch ourselves. We're already well known, we've got a big name, we are known for our wearable technology. Why not? Why not enter that market? Because there's nothing to say that we wouldn't be able to make a good go of it, particularly given that there are more advancements in the industry to look at things such as specific sporting activities like running, cycling, swimming, and golf, tracking your swings, tracking your stroke, etc. So a very big threat and opportunity here. This could be the thing that makes or breaks Vita. The smartwatch market is growing. The smartwatch market is going to have a big impact on the fitness and activity tracker market. We can either embrace it or we can be threatened by it. And further evidence of the threat posed by smartwatches is summarized here in this final sentence, where it says, in 2018, global unit sales exceeded fitness and activity trackers for the first time. So that's a good sentence to use in your exam. One of the key things that the exam report said is that students don't appear to have read and studied and brought in enough information from the pre-scene. And so if we are answering a question about the possibilities of entering this smartwatch market, here is a good figure to use, or a good sentence to use directly from the pre-scene to justify perhaps the need to move into the smartwatch market. The smartwatches exceeded the sales of fitness and activity trackers. They are becoming a bigger market than fitness and activity trackers. So it's justification for the move, it adds weight to your argument, and it's also bringing in useful information from the pre-scene, which is something that the examiners want you to do. So that brings us to the end of this first video, and as you can see, we've only looked at 3 pages and we've already uncovered a wealth of information. We've uncovered plenty of information about what is useful to Vita, what is critical to their operations. We've looked at the external environment and how that can have an impact. We've looked at the various different stakeholders. We've looked at potential opportunities for the organization to expand, be that going into virtual gyms, be that going into the smartwatch industry. And we've also looked at the various different stakeholders of the organization. Even if we go right back to this very small section on the opening page, we've got employees, we've got the app store providers, we've got competitors, we've got suppliers. lots of different stakeholders that we need to consider whenever we are creating a new product, whenever we are analyzing our strategy, whenever we are looking at various different options that the organization could undertake. So, given that we've got all this information now, we've got all these models, we've got our critical success factors, our Mendelow's, our 5 forces, our Pestel, our Ansoff, we're already starting to build that up, and we'll continue to build on those models as we work through the pre-scene. So please join me for those next videos where we will expand on everything that we have discussed so far. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you have enjoyed it, and more importantly, you have found it useful. I'd like to finish by just telling you a few things about the products that we produce here at Astranti and the ones that are part of our course. So these materials can all be purchased as part of the course or purchased individually. So we have our study text. We have 3 study texts for all the objective test exams. So 3 study texts for E1, P1, F2, F3, etc. But we also have the study text specifically for the case study exams, split into 2 parts. The first is about how to approach the exam, how to analyze the information, how to plan your answers, how to write your answers, and also the second part, which looks at the key theories from the objective test levels that are relevant to the particular case study. So if you are looking at P2, F2, E2 for the management exam, F3, P3, E3 for the strategic case study exam, and so on. We have our course videos, which look at how to plan your answers, how to manage your time effectively. These are the key reasons why people fail the exam. We have our pre-scene analysis, which looks at the pre-scene in a lot of depth, applies key information to that, and also concludes with the strategic analysis, where we look at the various different models in the CIMA syllabus and apply them to the case, and also the top 10 most likely issues to arise in your exam. Generally, we have a 70 to 80% accuracy rate on our top 10 issues. Our industry pack, which details in great depth the history and the current contemporary issues within the particular industry that the pre-scene is based on. We also have 20 to 25 industry examples that you can use within your answers. We have mock exams that can be purchased with or without marking and feedback, where you can get some real exam practice in, look for the kinds of things that the examiner is going to bring up in the exam, and also get marking and feedback from expert markers who have marked for CIMA and for us for many years, who know exactly the kinds of things that the examiner is looking for, exactly the kinds of mistakes that students often make, and can provide lots of detailed feedback to ensure that you improve on your performance. We also have our master classes, which are 2 day-long classes which look at all the key issues facing students in the exam. We will also go through live planning, showing you how to plan your answers effectively, how to write your answers effectively. Again, key things that cause people to fail the strategic case study exam, or any of the case study exams for that matter. And also, if you do sign up for our course, provided that you have filled out your forms, provided that you have submitted your mocks, provided you have done everything to show that you have really given it your all to try and pass this exam, we also offer a pass guarantee, giving a free resit to anyone who fails the exam.